Hello, hello. We'll get started pretty soon. Just gonna give folks a few more minutes to join, and we'll go from there. Hope everyone's having a great Thursday so far. Gonna just share my screen really quick. Hey, Spencer,
Hello.
how you doing? Good morning. Francis, hello, hello. Good to see you. Awesome. Well, since everyone is here, why don't we get started? So we got a great crew today. Got an awesome set of content to go through. Today's webinar is really about closing the loop in security operations with AI, and I'm really excited to chat through a few things around the evolution of really where we've gone in SOC from just manual SIM-based workflows into now with agents. So there's a lot that we'll talk through together with this group. Spencer was gracious enough to join us from HealthEquity to talk through his experience of using Panther and using AI to scale their security operations. And then Francis is here from Software Analyst Cyber Research, they just put out incredible work around analyzing what's happening in cyber and really just kind of understanding the trends and what folks are doing there. So it should be a great conversation today. And Francis, do you want to give just a quick introduction? Oh, Francis, is your video maybe? Oh, there we go. Hey, Francis.
Oh, there we go now. Okay, just having camera issues. Pleasure meeting Jack and Spencer, and really excited to be joined here. Thank you as well to Panther for hosting this webinar. Yeah, my name is Francis. I'm the founder, CEO of Software Analysts Cyber Research, or cybersecurity research and advisory firm. I'm focused on SecOps, identity, cloud, and AI security. We speak to extensive number of cybersecurity leaders, practitioners, getting their perspectives on major problems, pain points that they're facing today. And obviously, we speak to lots of the vendor ecosystem as well as different solution providers out there matching those problems. And so I'm excited to share a lot of the insights that we hear and we've gathered over the last few years.
Thanks for being here, Francis. Spencer,
All right, thanks, Jack. Happy to be here. We're new Panther customers from last fall and rapidly been deploying and enabling some of the functions, largely to the taking the benefits from the work in the Panther team. So super excited to sit here and talk about what we've seen so far.
awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear both of your perspectives. It's gonna be a fun chat. So why don't I start just by giving the high level of really what the evolution has been in the SOC for the last few years. I'll talk through a little of what Panther is doing in that process, and then we'll see a demo. I'll talk through how our platform works, and then I'll hand to Spencer and Francis to chat through some real use cases and sort of broader industry trends and where things are headed. So to give a quick background, I've been working in cyber for a very long time. I was a security analyst for many years. I worked for Yahoo, I worked for Airbnb, and I founded the company just because we really wanted to solve a data scale problem. It was very common about 10 years ago to really struggle with getting all the logs in at cloud scale. So when I was at Airbnb, we were scaling extremely fast as a business. It was one of those mid 2010s like hyper growth companies. And what we really were running into were just a lot of issues with traditional SIM. They were really challenging to scale in that it just required a huge amount of operational overhead to have additional indexers and really just make sure that the data that we needed for detection response was able to get ingested and able to be used at the velocity and the nature that we cared about when it came to detection and monitoring all our various threat models. So we founded Panther on the premise of three different things. The first was we needed it to be cloud native. We knew that all organizations were moving to cloud, and this was, in the mid 2010s. And we wanted to be able to accommodate the scale and the continued growth of those cloud-based companies. So Panther had to be cloud native. It had to have near zero operational overhead in order to allow security teams to get all the data that they needed and cover all their various threat models that were important for them. The second area that was really important to us was really around two things: latency, so getting alerts quickly, and then also code-driven detection. And code-driven detection was really predicated on this desire for treating security like software engineering. So high reliability through things like testing and declaring these detections in a shared framework that could be then committed to code and collaborated with your team. So it really was a strong foundation to have confidence that when the actual behaviors do happen in your environment, that you detect them accurately and quickly. So cloud native, code driven, and the third was high scale. We really needed the system to just elastically scale, whether you're sending 500 gigabytes of logs per day or 500 terabytes of logs per day. And we've seen, petabyte scale very consistently throughout our customer base for the last several years. And it just allows security teams to not even think about the operational side and really just focus on the security work. And we went through this evolution for many years where we were building up this technical foundation. We were giving teams like a very powerful system, but we ended up realizing that there was still one other big problem. And it was that this was really just kind of the foundation. This was the 0 to 10, where security teams could get all the data that they needed centralized, and they could have these detections, and that was great. But on the other side of it was a human scale problem. And we found that the bottleneck was that just scaling the expertise of the security team was very hard. It requires a lot of training, a lot of hiring, and the reason that you need to scale the expertise is that most alerts in the SOC are fall within this gray area. So I think there are some alerts that are very high confidence. We know this is bad, and then we have a lot of alerts that really come through as a way of just getting some informational signal. But the majority of the analysis falls in this gray area where it really requires human judgment. And it requires human judgment because there's such a diversity of knowledge and context that's needed to actually come to that judgment of if this is benign or risky. And with deterministic automation, it was just really hard to scale. And when AI was introduced, in the last few years with large language models and subsequently with AI agents, we saw that as an opportunity to start to actually scale the expertise of the SOC. So when agents started to become prominent and LLMs started to become prominent, we saw and we observed that a lot of them were just being applied on top of the same manual workflows, where maybe it's closing an alert faster or summarizing an alert or explaining something. And that's fine, that's useful. But we felt like it was fundamentally mismatched with the potential of this technology. And really where we became really interested in this idea is like, because Panther has this very strong technical foundation that ended up actually being perfect for agents, how could we actually build a system that could make itself better and help scale the expertise of the SOC? And we call this concept closing the loop. We think that by combining a lot of various aspects of the SOC together into one place, you can cover more use cases. You can actually start to scale the amount of threat models that are covered and really the work that your team can handle on a day-to-day basis. So Panther has evolved. We've evolved into a AI SOC platform, and we call this a complete AI SOC platform because we're providing not only the agents across the entire lifecycle, but we're providing the infrastructure as well. And when you have these tightly coupled together, the agents deeply understand the job end to end and what it takes to actually accomplish those tasks. So through our data pipelining features of getting data into the system, Panther AI can help you create schemas and ensure that the data lands in the right format. The second aspect of this is detection. So making sure that we can help the teams that are using Panther create these detections to cover their threat models or make changes to our built-in detections quite easily. The third area, which I think we're probably all familiar with here, is alert triage, and this is probably where the majority of the applications of AI have focused in the SOC. And it's because this ends up being the highest leverage point for security teams. It's the place where we spend our most amount of time. And then we have elements of reporting and just general browsing and usage. And we have a search agent, and then we also have Panther AI as a chat. So we're going to see some of this in action today. But I think the takeaway here is that by putting agents across this entire life cycle, you not only improve the isolated workflows, but you actually help make the others better as well. And an example of that is the AI alert triage agent will autonomously go through triage end to end, and then it will actually store that analysis back on the alert. So the next time that it looks at it, it's much more informed on what's happened in the past. And this isn't about the agents acting completely autonomously, by the way. There's a lot of human in the loop, and we recognize that trust is just such an important aspect of a system like this. So we'll talk through that a little bit deeper. So really the benefit here is as we put all this infrastructure together, we want to be a singular platform that security teams can really build on in this AI-centric world. So the data lake is just such an important aspect of here of understanding really the various shape of the data and how to pivot through the data through threat hunting, through detection, et cetera. And the detection engine is really just the capability of doing that analysis. And we just find that by providing AI agents on top of this infrastructure, we just start to see things improve significantly over time. So complete platform, agents end to end, and we've been shipping a lot of really interesting features here. So this week, we're really excited to announce a lot of these. Our version 120 that came out on Monday had a few features that really make this workflow much more possible and scalable. So we've had our AI alert triage agent out for some time, and that is escalating now into a much more autonomous system that can now take action on your behalf. And the way that that works is that we have some predefined actions, and then you can customize those as well through things like runbooks and descriptions and organizational prompts and these things that allow you to really tailor the system to be really specific for the needs of your security team. And we've always had that as a core primitive of Panther in detection as code. We recognize that not all vendor content out of the box is going to work perfectly for your environment, but we hope that through the tools and through the various ways of customizing that over time it continues to get more and more tailored for how you want to operate. So the agents can now auto close benign alerts. That happens through our risk scoring. They also can run autonomously. So every single time an alert gets created in Panther, the agent will spin up, it will do the triage, it'll give you a result, and then depending on your risk tolerance, you can have it auto close or escalate. We've also introduced an ability for our agents to call out to external MCP servers. And it might sound scary because I think MCP is fundamentally been a new technology that's required a lot of scaffolding around the sides of it for it to be safe and responsible. But we've done a lot to really ensure that that happens. So all the authentication is OAuth 2 that we support there. And then we also have a lot of guardrails around what those which tools can be called through the MCP. So there's a lot of control that you have. And it's something that we actually are really excited about because it can connect the agents to the broader IT and security stack and really lean into building significantly higher context and actionability of the agents. The final feature that came out in this last release that we're really, really excited about is the scheduled runs. And the scheduled runs is really similar to a trend that we're seeing happen in AI, where the agents will autonomously start up. They'll go through some workflow, whether this is threat hunting, maybe it's monthly reporting, maybe it's detection tuning, and then they'll be able to take some action based on the permissions that you grant the agent. So we think that this is going to really change how we think about detection. It's something that I'm personally very excited about because I think in the past, a lot of detections were just highly, highly specific. And this pattern allows us to be a bit more broad with our detection and knowing that we have a agent on the other side of that doing triage. So a lot of new features have come out recently. Our docs and our release page has a lot more information about how these things work. But what I want to do is take us through just two quick demos, and then hand to Spencer to hear his perspective. So we're going to talk through what it looks like to do agentic triage in Panther. So in this particular alert that we're looking at right here, we're monitoring if an IAM user creates access keys for another user, and that tends to be indicative of a persistence tactic, via a MITRE attack. So what we're seeing here is just the high level of the alert, the description. You can add a runbook that really helps teach the agent the criteria of what you would classify something as risky or benign. And these aren't required, but it does improve the performance. And all alert triage really has this same singular format where you get a summary of everything that had happened. You get structured evidence based on all the context gathering that the agent did. And then you can really dissect and understand how it came to this conclusion. So what this is looking at is we had seen that in our run book that if anyone outside of engineering does anything in this account, then we want to deem that as riskier. And that was something that we defined in our run book. And that's just something that we define in our organization, this theoretical organization that I'm talking about. We get the key findings as well. So the key findings are just the five most important things you need to understand. You get this really nice attack graph of seeing the sequence of that behavior. And, by the way, this is not just that one event that happened in CloudTrail. It's actually all the surrounding events as well that the agent went through and data gathered for me. So if we break this down, we see that all of the alerts get loaded in. We see the detection logic gets loaded in, and then we see the agent go and do pivoting based on various attributes, who that user was, what the IAM access key was, and just additional pivots to understand everything that could have happened around this time. And then what we get is a detection assessment. So this is based on two key areas around technical accuracy. Did this rule actually work as intended? And did this alert have security value? And we build this into our classification of either useful or noise. And we're also able to take subsequent actions. And I think this is really where this closing the loop comes really strongly into play. Because most of the time, it's not just that initial alert, it's really a lot of the other additional questions that happen after that. And Panther AI, because it has, again, access to so much context and data, it has the ability to take very broad action across the system. And it has this ability to do human in the loop. So what this wants to do now is it wants to set the status to triaged, it wants to label this alert, and then it wants to leave a comment on how things are going. And we would continue taking action to remediate this issue. But if you notice, we asked the following question, hey, was this key actually ever used? And as a result of those pivots, we saw that it actually wasn't ever used. And that's a really good indication of just having much more clarity on the scope and possible blast radius of this activity. So another thing as well that we can do, like I mentioned, we have the ability to connect to remote MCPs. And let's say that I wanted to open a case in Notion. So Notion's a great system for documentation, for databases, and for persistence. And I don't know if everyone saw the Notion security team, the solution that they did recently, which was really interesting. But I wanted to sort of pay homage to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a case in Notion based on this activity, and then we'll sort of use that as our singular place to understand what else has to happen next on this alert. And then it allows us to really go where our team works. So let's assume it's in Notion, but it could be something like a case management system outside of Panther. It could be a ticketing system. And then we see here that it filled in all the metadata. It gave us a huge amount of context on what had been happening. And then I can go through and manipulate it. And then it's also bidirectional. So being able to use Panther AI again to get the latest state on that case is very easy and will just naturally happen. So that's agentic triage. And we saw that there's a few loops in there that exist. There's one around just making sure that the agent has the complete context to understand if this is actually benign or risky. We saw the ability to actually set the label on those alerts, which helps future triage. And then we saw a way of actually persisting these learnings in something like Notion, but that persistence can happen in various ways. So we're really focused on not only just getting through triage quicker or maybe summarizing an alert, but actually going a step deeper and making sure that we truly capture what happened there. I want to talk through detection tuning as well, and then I'll hand it over to Spencer. So, detection tuning is a very common workflow that we go through in the SOC, and as we saw in the last example, we labeled the alert quality, and what we can do as a result of that is we can actually look back through a period of time. Maybe that's 30 days, maybe that's a week, maybe it's 90 days. And I'm going to use a different detection for this example, something around Okta failed logins. So this is a common thing that we detect because we always try to make sure that access into our identity provider is really secured. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, hey, let's tune the Okta failed login detection looking back 90 days. And again, because the agent has such a deep understanding of the alerts, the detections, and all the history of what had happened, it can actually go through and look at the behaviors that led to those noisy alerts getting created. And this is going to allow us to pinpoint tuning potential in a way that's balanced and doesn't introduce the risk of false negatives. So again, it's going to go through, it's going to write these queries. It's going to give us a readout of what's actually happened in these 90 days. So we see the 60%, 67% noise, which is pretty high. We want that number way lower. And then we see that legitimate user error ends up being a very common reason that these alerts get created. So we get additional patterns in the logs as well, where MFA events are the number one signal driver. And then we get some recommendations on what we could do to address this. So what we're actually going to do is we're just going to do the simplest fix here, which is we're going to extend the grouping period, which is one of the recommendations. And this is a very simple metadata change, but it's very, very challenging to get these answers. It requires doing lots of queries, doing statistics, looking at the data, and we just went through and did it in a minute. And because Panther AI has this ability to change the underlying detections and maybe add some additional context back into those alerts, we can really maintain a very deep understanding of the state of our detections and what we've evolved over time. So two quick examples of how Panther AI is closing the loop, making detections better, really ensuring that we're saving and distilling the things that are really interesting that are happening in our environment so the agent gets smarter over time. And we're seeing real results here. I think the biggest one is around alert volume reduction. So when customers go through this flow of having AI as a tuning agent, we just see a huge reduction of noise and overall reduction of volume. Teams that used to get, 500 alerts a day are now like bringing that down to zero. And it's just really, really impressive that we're able to defend our organizations this way now. So I'm very excited about the potential for signal quality to increase. We see this also through customers like Infoblox that say it effectively takes it down by 70%. So the idea of tuning a detection, and that 70 to 80% is pretty common across the board. And now with the autonomous alert triage, we see customers like Loglass are auto-resolving 80% of their alerts, which is pretty impressive as well. And because Panther AI does a good job of documenting and notifying customers through things like Slack and in the Panther console itself, you can really watch and audit it and make sure it's operating aligned to the way that your security team wants to triage. So that's the speed run. That's the demo on some of our latest AI agents. There's a lot more that goes into the system. It's a really exciting feature and functionality that we've been able to create alongside with the partnership of our incredible customers. So, I am very, very grateful for the feedback that they give us. It's really helped us build an effective system here. And, I'd love to introduce Spencer again to just chat through how he's thinking about this evolution as a cyber leader at HealthEquity. And Spencer, what I'll do is I'll give you the access to change the slides. So you should be able to go and do that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jack, and hi everyone. So I'll kind of get started with who we are at HealthEquity, right? We're one of the largest HSA providers in the country. as well as in addition to several other consumer-directed benefits across many of the large Fortune 500 companies are our clients and business partners. And so with that, we operate in that line across a large amount of financial data and personal health data in support of all those clients. So there's a high level of requirement and expectation and excellence that we have to deliver in order to protect that information and service our members and clients. So it's a fun and exciting mission to support at HealthEquity, and it's fulfilling and challenging, which is fun. But let's diving into kind of what we're seeing from Panther, right? We came from a place where everything, we had managed services, the SIM was managed, the tier 1 to 2 triage was managed, and quite frankly, probably not managed that well on their part. No, and nothing short of our teams, working hard to try and push the needle. You can only make a car go as fast as it's capable of, and if you didn't build the car, or you don't know how it's built or how it's supposed to run, it's hard to influence its direction and how it operates. So we knew we needed to make a change. We also didn't have three years to make that change. Every single day, this space changes, right? Whether the threats that we face, of course, we've known that for the last 10, 15 years, but it's also the technology is moving at a pace, just blistering. It's just moving extremely fast. And in fact, from the time we onboarded Panther, which was at the beginning of November, to now, they've probably introduced dozens of features. And I'm short selling that, dozens of actual features that can be implemented for organizations with almost nothing that's like, oh, well, that's nice, but I probably won't ever use that. Almost everything is like exactly what a team would need, which is an extremely refreshing experience. And so we brought that entire detection engineering lifecycle in-house, right? Allow the team that built Panther and the back end of detections as code, the framework of how it's built is now expanded. You don't have to know Python, intricately to be able to build detections. It helps to build complex analytics, but the tool with the detection agents that are built into Panther make it extremely easy for teams that don't have that in-house dedicated experience to necessarily just take advantage of the agent, let it build the detections, and you can kind of review and QA the efficacy of that. So that's been nice. It's also enabled us to not necessarily scale people. It's not about a people problem. It's a process and technology problem that we're able to solve now. The last thing is we have virtually no limits in what we're able to ingest. And it's not even about ingest. It's not about paying the bill. Like it used to be the issue, right? It's like, how are we going to pay the bill? That's not the problem, right? The problem now is I just need to get it faster, right? I can get everything I want, and now I just need to get it, and it's super easy to get it, right? It's if we use a data fabric solution prior to Panther, and that's just because we have different data destinations, right? But Panther makes it extremely easy to pull data in directly. I think we were up with all core data sources, and my team's on this call, so I don't want them to kick me virtually. I think we were up in under a month with pushing 5 terabytes a day of ingest. And not only that, right? It's highly super structured data is what I would classify it as. The other teams I've worked at, it's the right kind of extraction, it's the right kind of formatting. There's this framework for tools like Splunk, like index time extractions. Like if you do a bunch of work ahead of time in Splunk and you lay the data out correctly as it comes in, you can search faster and you can detect faster and you can do things. Well, Panther does that for you, right? They have their Panther fields in the data, which extract all the typical things that you would want to search across, probably 90 to 95% of the critical things. And those are extremely well-structured fields that make it fast to search, which then influence the outcomes that we saw here, right? Because of the nature of the scale of the data that we're able to pull in, the fact that it's structured that way, and just kind of going back to what Jack mentioned about the foundations of Panther. Panther was built with data warehousing technology in the back end, right? Which probably several years ago was, I don't know if people thought that was crazy, but it was definitely different, right? I think people were messing around with like Hadoop and other kind of things, but just picking like a Snowflake and Databricks backend, well, that's big data, right? And that's how big data analytics functions. The gaps that those technologies have had is a really good cyber analytics front end of that and an ability to like actually perform detections and search and things like that. If you take that foundation and you plug properly design agents on top of that, what you end up with is deterministic outcomes, and that's what we've seen, which is actually the key to what we look for is in order to bring what you see down there, just to call out one of these items where, mean time to triage is a metric that we track, right? That 30 to 45 minutes, that's previously we had humans going through. Hopefully we have the right data at the right time. Hopefully the playbook is written the right way, and hopefully, we're able to have consistency in our skills program across the team, right? But all that's no longer an issue because now we have a deterministic agent design. We have highly superstructured data. We have all the data we would want, a simple natural language prompt runbook, and it's able to just sit there and be extremely deterministic on its analysis. And so the outcomes that we're seeing, right, from just the tier one, I would say tier one to tier two triage investigation, it's not just alert summarization, it's complete investigation, probably in a lot of ways up to that tier two level of expectation at least, and it's deterministic at a high level of efficacy. So that enables us to then do the downstream things that we want to do with automation and traditional SOAR, trad SOAR, right? Things that you would typically do where it was a lot of different steps. You're able to now deliver that to another solution for automation or build it in Panther with some of the stuff Jack just mentioned at extremely high levels of assurance that it's accurate. So it's been phenomenal for us. It's been extremely exciting. I don't know. I've been doing this a long time. I don't know of another vendor on the market that has exactly this design, that cares about it this much, that kind of knows exactly what is needed to push out, right? And I think the last couple of things I'll mention, and Jack, you can let me know when I need to slide over to Francis, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things, which are the ways in which Panther plugged features in are exactly the things that you would want. And it's just a couple, three or four things. When that AI SOC analyst, the agents that are in there running are doing this triage, first of all, it's all open box. I have folks in my network right now that are leaving AI SOC vendors and some of the other partners out there because they can't see the things that are in the thing, right? They don't know what it's doing. Well, if I can't answer to my boss, to the CISO or whoever it is that's asking, what is your system doing? It's a bad place to be. And it's a place that we can't operate in, right? In our space. So we don't operate in that space. We can always answer, this is what it's doing. The second piece of that is as you walk through it, if you saw what Jack was showing, it has 3 or 4 critical enrichment feeds that typically you would have to like manually take care of in the past. So we use a tip like a anomaly, others could use MISP or other things. That integration, first class citizen. So immediately we're able to plug that in. We virtually don't have to do anything else. We actually plug that in and there's already out of the box correlation, enrichment. The triage components work exactly as they should. Then you add that into, it pulls in a MISP warning list, right? MISP warning list is an extremely valuable enrichment data set for like internet level analysis. So CIDR blocks and ASNs, like what you're actually seeing with those individual IP addresses, right? That's a raw feed that typically teams would have to work and engineer solutions to pull that in. It's done. It's either turned on by default or it's like a checkbox. Checkboxes are nice when you're moving this quickly. The last thing I'll mention is the feed that comes with the tool. The IP info subscription and kind of product piece that's slid in there provides all that individual context. So when these things come in, I can get threat intelligence, I can get IP info enrichment for these indicators and warning lists, which completely aid the AI SOC's ability to be deterministic in that solution. So I just wanted to mention that all of those pieces are essentially baked in from the first day, which feed straight into the deterministic outcomes of the AI SOC agent flow. And that's all I have, Jack.
Thank you, Spencer. The one thing I'll add on the enrichment side is we also have the ability to pull identity information, and that's just so critically important to contextualize alerts because you want to understand does the behavior match the job scope of the person performing it. So that, in addition to everything else you mentioned around IP info and threat intelligence, MISP, really bringing all that context together is really key for agents to be effective. So. Spencer, thank you so much for taking us through that. Your perspective is extremely interesting. Would love to pass it to Francis to talk through, kind of give us the high level of where things are headed right now.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Could you guys hear me well? Good. Yeah, perfect. You guys have really set the scene really well, both Jack as well as Spencer, in terms of giving the giving the perspectives of the practitioner, in terms of just the results and some of giving us examples of how some of the case studies are working today on the market. I think a lot of what you guys have really helped to set the scene is pretty much a lot of the same concept that I'm really covering. Is the fact that, today within the SecOps world, we're seeing a huge amount of transformation. And our firm, Software Analyst Cyber Research, as we talked about early on, we're a modern research and advisory firm, and a big focus of the work we really do is really talking to different practitioners. We do them through whether they're dinners or events or live events, and really just getting to hear from CISOs and actually seeing what problems they have and what needs they want. And it's been very clear to us the last 6 months, the SecOps category in and of itself is really ripe for disruption. Obviously, we cover other areas like cloud, identity, data, as well as AI security. However, I think definitely at the early onset of the agentic wave, it's been really clear how much opportunity there is. So happy for me to dive right in. And obviously, we have a lot more of our research publications, which you could find on our website. Just Google Software and Cyber Research, and you could find some of our work. So maybe without further ado, I'll go through some of my slides very quickly, and then my goal is really to allow and maybe to just finish up with a conversational area in terms of maybe bringing all three of us together to maybe speak to some of the key findings. I think a lot of this is to be very clear. AI SOC was like the topic of last year. I like to say in 2025. I mean, if you wanted to pick one of the top three, this was one of the most talked about topics. And I do think obviously there was a lot of noise, there was a lot of hype around this. But also there was real results being seen in terms of SecOps teams, in terms of the alerts volume being able to be shrink down into the most critical points, because we known for decades and for the history of the SOC, alert fatigue has probably been probably number one alongside the amounts of cost that you pay, with your traditional SIM, which by the way was the initial onset of Panther, and part of the problem Panther really aimed to solve. But when we think about, just broadly speaking, about SecOps, alert fatigue and the cost, we call it the tax volume you have to pay on many of these legacy things has been the crux of it. But I think last year the big excitement with AI SOC was it finally felt like we are going to solve for this problem, and we finally have the solutions right now. And I think some of the stats that I have here are pretty much equivalent to that. But also, I do think some of the stats early on, Jack, you had mentioned around, some of your customers seeing about 80%, 85% alert volume reduction, or even just 80% of alerts being auto resolved, are very consistent with what we're hearing on the industry as well. On that, so I think I just skipped this way too much. Okay, there we go. So right now, I think like the three major core themes or major trends that we see, I think a lot of the SecOps leaders we're speaking to right now are rethinking the SOC transformation right now. So there's like, what are the areas of my SOC that leverages that AI could be leveraged? I do think all of the core components by which, Jack showed early on, as it relates to the data pipeline, the detection, the alerting, the search, all of these areas of the SOC right now is going through transformation. And I think but one thing we do here though from security leaders is the fact that, look, we can't just dump, like the SOC is very complex for many of these enterprises, and you can't just dump AI right away and like start to see all the results. And I think this is even why some of the noise around AI SOC has actually lowered down, or it's been quieted down this year, because it's going to be a phased process. We need to infuse AI in a phased process to see, obviously right now the triage and the alerting areas are where we're seeing the biggest transformation, and we expect to see that more of, but it's going to go through a phased process. People are improving their detection logic. We published a paper on this earlier this week, as well as other parts of their SOC. So this is a big piece of what we're seeing, but definitely the biggest area we feel very confident is the transformation happening over the next few years. And the catalyst has never been much stronger than ever. Second here, data pipeline and detection quality. A lot of this isn't necessarily new because I think like a lot of the data pipelining solutions, you could say some vendors, Panther obviously, but Cribble and some of these solutions, whether about 5 years ago, really started to introduce this concept of really helping us create more healthy telemetry and drift detection. But I do think right now, honestly, with agents in the mix right now and more AI log volume or our melt data significantly growing right now. I do think there's a resurgence of this conversation of what does a healthy telemetry pipeline actually look like. And I think the team here at Panther was very smart to make one of a data table acquisition, which I do think enables some of that together with what they already had. But even just detection engineering in and of itself, we think detection engineering is going to go through a huge transformation as a result of just how easy it is now. And I think one of the stat Jack had mentioned, I think one of your customers, Infoblock, said 3x faster detection edits of SOC, right? And I do think these are some of the transformations that we are seeing right now. And last but not the least here is really the fact that the services model of what we've taught within the SOC is going through transformation as well right now. And so what we're seeing right now too, again, it feeds into what I talked about early on in the triage and alerting side where we're seeing AI capabilities. But also, I think historically at many SOCs, and I even think Spencer maybe talked to it about it as well, right? Maybe people have some MDR coverage, but I do think right now there's a lot of rethinking. We're seeing a lot of that trend around rethinking what your services model that you're attaching on to your existing SOC. And I think there's a transformation going on there in terms of could you leverage some of these AI SOC capabilities right now and reduce the need for those services model? So these are some of the core themes that we do see across the market. I think this slide really just speaks to itself, and I think it's something that's that is more important now as we think through the SOC. The evolution of the SOC right now has always been just humans and human-centric alerts, right? Whether it's manual rule creation, then fine-tuning and testing those detection logic, all the way to like humans being the ultimate drivers of like what gets remediated, what gets triaged. And I think right now, what we're seeing right now in the SOC gradually is really how do we make all of our alerts, our detection logic, triage more amenable to agents and AI to actually help make faster remediation. And I think one of the underappreciated components of maybe what companies like Panther offer on the market is really the fact that starting off their platform on a highly data-centric platforms like Snowflake and many of these new data cloud storage solutions really does allow for really does create a workload that really makes it easy for agents to be able to do triage a lot more faster. And I do think there's a huge opportunity there broadly within the market. And so right now, that is a huge transformation of what we see happening as the evolution of the SOC. A second component of this really is just the abstraction of the SOC, and you can see that in the depiction there, where we've always just thought about the SOC as being this centralized monolith type solution where you have to send all your data to this one provider and you do you do all your analytics on top of it. However, I do think what we've seen obviously with data pipeline solutions evolving over the last few years, we've seen this almost separation whereby right now you have a lot more flexibility in terms of where you're able to move your data to. And that has subsequently led the SOC to be a lot more federated now, because now you need to think through things in a much more federated nature, right? You need to think through, oh, my data that's in my S3 bucket, in my data lake, in my traditional on-prem SIEM, like you kind of have to think, and then now we have to have this federated search-like capability, and I think that's part of the reasons why we've seen federated search become a very core part of this. And last but not the least, it kind of feeds into this evolution of humans and agents working alongside in the SOC, and I think Spencer really emphasize it, and we hear this a lot from practitioners, is really the oversight, auditability, the ability to be able to audit and understand what your agents are actually doing. So I do think these are core components right now that we are seeing shifting within the SOC today. Not going over this too much, but I do think the huge part of the SOC today, is still very much written rules and very manual rule creation, manual testing, and blue teaming on top of existing detections that we might have. However, we really need to change. We're going to have to evolve to be a lot more runtime centric. And a core reason for this being the speed at which agents are going to be putting attacks into your SIM, whether it's through your identity, through lateral movements, or the types of new logs that we're going to have to do are going to be 2 to 3 times faster than we have. And so defenders have to think of really, how do we get our rule creation on the fly? How do we get more faster to be able to meet the needs and to deal with all of these different alert sources from identity, network, endpoint, and cloud and SaaS. And so this is an opportunity we do see more broadly in it of the market. And then all this also naturally feeds into the fact that, historically we've thought of alerts as just being an outcome centric. So a lot of the SOCs historically, and this is even how we got into the whole alert fatigue issue, really is the fact that, it's a derivative of whatever detection logic you have, whatever rules you have. However, in a world where agents are going to be significantly faster at helping you triage, we might actually have to start rethinking as, could alerts be almost inputs for your agents? And then does that help to feed into a runtime circle? And then what does that actually create in a decision runtime model? And we think this might be something we might increasingly have to think more about, of like, in this new world in which we're moving into, where we want continuous learning, on the fly learning, could alerts be actually an input centric? And so this is a thesis or a hypothesis, that we're proposing out to the market. And I think a lot of this comes back into what we define as a closed loop system around that has been emphasized throughout most of our call today so far. And obviously, the whole concept really, and I do really agree, it's something we don't hear a lot of, but essentially, you could really define this as, taking over, really moving into this continuous structured learning system that, whereby whenever an alert or an incident, or you have to investigate an actual issue, could we go into a situation whereby we go from triage, investigation, and operations, and then feeding that into a learning system, that's just better able to learn. And we're able to move into a stitched world, or almost a platform where we go from a detection all the way to detection, obviously, to investigation. And based off whatever has been learned from that, we're able to fine tune and evolve our detections internally. And that goes back to feed into lesser alerts, hopefully, lesser things you have to deal with. Your agents are better able to learn on the fly. And I do, this is one proposition of how we also like to think about this closed loop platform approach as well. And obviously, if this model actually does successfully work, where we're able to stitch together our data pipeline detections and alerting into this continuous learning cycle of detection, investigate, learning, tune, then ideally, the goal is really to reduce false positives, which really does get at the very heart of a lot of the challenges today being faced within SecOps teams today. So last but not the least, we just published this research piece just this past week. How do we think about the future of the SOC in terms of how we learn? Well, we've talked about emphasis throughout Jack as well as Spencer's presentation so far today, is really this whole feedback cycle of this closed loop ecosystem, as opposed to making this all separated parts of it in a world of agents, and where agents need a lot of context to be able to actually remediate and learn about your environment and move faster through improving MTTR and MTTD as well as your MTTR. And in a world of that, we need a closed loop system that stitches together your data pipeline solutions all the way to your storage and analytics and detection engine all the way to your triage. We almost need to have this closed loop system and more importantly, make this a fine-tuned learning process. And I think this is something we see across the ecosystem today. And this is a big trend that we do see. And this is an evolution or at least a SOC architectural model our firm has come up with to help leaders or cybersecurity leaders think through different components of this. Obviously, not every organization would have this full integrated stitch solution, but at some basic level, you might have some basic components of this. And I do think a big part of everything we've talked about being of this closed loop will be defining the future of SecOps, of going from recommendation, auto approve to auto execution. So maybe just to finish up and we could maybe leave the last few minutes here for Q&A is how do we summarize all of the trends that we see? We're definitely seeing, we've talked a lot about the fact that we're seeing a lot of decoupled overlays across the SOC today in terms of the fact that we're moving away from this monolithic centralized engine that dissolves people in cost, higher fatigue alerts, to almost a decoupled architecture that makes it easy for security teams. We need to have a closed loop system where your data plane becomes your strategic core layer to it, where we're able to stitch together pipelines, your lake, as well as have cost control. AI is very much expected now. I think it's almost baseline, whether you're leveraging some basic co-pilot for alerts management or case summaries, to all the way to full-scale investigations. And we've talked about closed-loop system, and last but not the least is the services model being evolved as a result of AI. So all of the trends we've talked today are all of the big trends, at least we're noticing across the market today, and areas where we do think Panther matches into that future. So maybe with that, we'll wrap it up, and maybe three of us maybe could come together and just give some maybe answer some questions within the last few minutes.
Francis, thank you. It was an awesome overview of where things are headed. We just saw a few questions come through. So actually, I'd love for Spencer to answer this first one. Someone asked about how long does it take before you start seeing the loop working, and when does alert volume actually go down?
Yeah, I can take that. I will say it probably varies based on that company's appetite for introducing these technologies, but the infrastructure and the background of how Panther is built is there almost immediate. If you depending on the data, if you ingest or onboard a tier one source like Wiz or something like that, that particular data set, you can expect a high level of efficacy to bring that alert volume down. Alert volume in the context of a human requiring potentially to do the investigation. So as an example, it's probably largely based on the appetite of the organization, how fast they want to move. The infrastructure and the technology is there to support a rapid ability to scale quickly.
There's another question around what happens if bad data goes into the loop? If someone makes a bad call, does the system keep learning on the wrong thing? This is a great question, by the way. Spencer, I don't know if you have context on this. I'm happy to speak to this as well. But wanted to give you the opportunity first if you had any firsthand experience with this.
Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
no, I don't think that, I don't want to speak on the technical integrations, but I almost, based on what we've seen, it treats the triage and investigation in a deterministic way, but it doesn't necessarily by default just take whatever it was told and automatically use that every time and have this cascading effect downstream. So not only do you always know what it does, but it seems to almost take the deterministic approach, but have a fairly clean slate as it starts. But I don't want to speak on that too far, as Jack and the team have built it a certain way. But from what we've seen, it doesn't have a scaling effect of taking something wrong and making it worse.
So the way I would answer this is my recommendation is that teams sort of take a phase approach. And this is something that we've talked a lot about on the Detection and Scale podcast, where you want to start where it's more informational. So maybe it's not taking action quite yet on closing the alerts, leaving the comments. So you can take this approach where you sort of observe for maybe a few weeks and you just see does Panther AI have the right context to actually make the calls aligned to how you would think about the problems? And and then there's a few elements of tuning that are really important here. So there's one element we call an organization profile, and that really just maps out the people, processes, and technology, like very high level. Like what's the organization that the agents are protecting? What are the threat models you care about? What are the like absolute like must do things to operate in this team? And the agents are actually very good at following. So we use Claude models. Claude models are designed in a way to not take like nefarious action. Like if you tell it the principles you want to follow, it's very good at following it. And there's other more micro ways of affecting it as well. So in the example of the demo, we saw the description in the runbook. The description is really a description of the threat model that you're covering, and the runbook is more of the criteria that you would gauge if something's risky or benign. So those are additional ways of tuning. It's not, again, you don't need to do these things, but it helps nudge the model and like Spencer said a lot of the times here, give a more deterministic outcome while using AI and gain the benefits of AI through things like tool calling and taking action. So I hope that gives the context. It's a really good question. It's something that we're continuously trying to optimize. So two questions from John. You say you're an AI SOC. Does that mean I would not need to look at tools from other companies? Yes, and other systems before autonomous defense and remediation. Or do you work in coordination? So I'll say you certainly don't need an independent AI SOC analyst when you use Panther. On the defense and remediation side, I would say yes-ish. We're broadening the use cases that we can support. I would actually also extend it into cloud security as well because Panther's had a numerous amount of cloud security features for some time, and we're seeing a lot of customers really gravitate towards that in the AI world where they can ask a question on, hey, I want to check the posture of this bucket or this IAM user, and I want to compare it also to the activity that we see broadly in the logs. So use cases like CSPM, and then use cases like case management, auto remediations, even SOAR, are now all effectively able to be achieved through a combination of the right data, through context and the right actionability. So things are certainly broadening with the AI story, and we want to be able to support as many of those use cases as possible. And then, John, your second question, do you find it valuable to ingest every source we might have, or are there sources that don't make sense to ingest? I would say if there is no inherent security value of the data, you don't need to ingest it. Like, I think we don't very often see metrics data, for example, ingested through Panther just because um, it hasn't really made its way into how the agent would use that yet. But anything that can be used for incident response, either reactively or proactively, we'd recommend pulling in, especially if there's anything really around like the crown jewels, the most important threat models of your organization. Data diversity really does help here. And Spencer, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that one.
No, I would say what we've done is, we obviously are able to bring in a large amount of data, but we have a data lake that sits even in front of Panther because we send to multiple destinations. So the data is stored in an intermediary within the Fabric solution that we use, and we store 8 to 10 there. And we only pull in five because we only really need five. So we've done that kind of, if it's not going to be baked into a detection or a correlation or something that one of the operations teams needs to action, then we keep it there for 7 to 10 years, and it's just from an investigative standpoint. So still based on what you need, but the speed in which you can onboard makes it to where if you decide you need data, you can probably have that data in your system by the end of the day.
Amazing. Want to thank you, Spencer, and you, Francis, for making the time, and for everyone on the call who spent the last hour with us. We're really excited where things are headed in the SOC, especially around AI, and keep an eye out for more announcements coming fairly soon. So, thank you so much for the time. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you again to Francis and Spencer for coming and sharing today. Have a great one.
Thank
Thank
you,
you all.
everyone. Thank you.